Before we begin, I want to mention what inspired this episode. Recently, I watched the film Undertone with my husband, and while the movie itself is a work of fiction, my husband suggested research into something that has fascinated people for generations. The idea that familiar nursery rhymes might be hiding something beneath the surface, something darker and forgotten. Now, before we go any further, it's important to separate fact from folklore. Many of the dark explanations attached to nursery rhymes today have been repeated so often that people assume they're historical fact, when in reality, some have evidence behind them while others seem to have emerged centuries after the songs themselves. But whether they're true or not isn't really the point. The fact that these stories continue to survive says something about us, because there is something deeply unnerving about taking a song you sang as a child and discovering that it may have had roots in plague, persecution, political conflict, or tragedy. And tonight, we're going to explore some of the most famous examples. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's step back into childhood. Only this time, we're bringing a flashlight. Think back to when you were young. Maybe your parents sang you lullabies before bed. Maybe you learned hand clapping games on the playground. And maybe you joined a circle of friends and spun and spun and spun around until everyone collapsed into a laughing pile on the ground. The songs were simple. The words were incredibly easy to remember. Most of us never stopped to ask, where did they come from? Why would we? Children rarely question the stories they're given, but adults do. And sooner or later, someone whispers that one of those innocent little songs has a dark secret. For many people, that journey begins with a rhyme you've probably heard dozens, if not hundreds of times. Ring Around the Rosie. The version most people know goes something like this. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ah-to-shoo, we all fall down. Now, at first glance, it's harmless. Children holding hands, walking in circles, falling down at the end. But then someone tells you the story. The ring around the rosy is supposedly the circular rash associated with plague victims. The pocket full of posies refers to flowers carried to ward off the smell of death. The sneezing represents illness. And we all fall down means everyone dies. It's one of those explanations that feels almost too perfect. The imagery lines up so neatly that it's incredibly easy to believe. The problem is that historians have never found convincing evidence connecting the rhyme to either the Black Death or the Great Plague of London. Versions of the rhyme appear much later than the outbreaks they're supposedly describing. In fact, many folklorists believe the plague interpretation is a relatively modern invention, a story attached to the rhyme long after it was already established. But here's what's fascinating. The explanation became more famous than the rhyme itself. Today, countless people know the plague story. Many don't realize historians dispute it. And that's where things become interesting. Because as we move from one nursery rhyme to another, a pattern begins to emerge. Not necessarily a pattern hidden in the songs, but a pattern hidden in us. Our desire to find darkness lurking beneath familiar things. And if that's true, then the next rhyme doesn't really need any help. Because even without a hidden meaning, it's already a little disturbing. Imagine singing a child to sleep with a lullaby that ends in disaster. Rock-a-bye baby on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall, and down will come baby, cradle and all. For something intended to comfort children, that's a surprisingly grim ending. Unlike Ring Around the Rosie, where people added darkness later, Rock-a-bye Baby seems to contain it from the very beginning. Over the years, several theories have emerged about its origins. One suggests English settlers observed Native American mothers suspending cradle boards from tree branches, allowing babies to sway gently in the wind. Another claims the rhyme was political satire aimed at the royal family. Others believe it was simply inspired by the dangers of poorly constructed cradles. No one really knows for certain. What we do know is that generations of parents have calmly sung about a baby falling from a tree. And somehow, no one questioned it. Maybe that's because childhood has always existed alongside danger. Today, we try to shield children from frightening realities. Historically, that wasn't always possible. Disease, death, and hardship were simply part of everyday life. Perhaps that's why darker themes found their way into songs and stories so naturally. And if we're talking about danger hidden inside something ordinary, there may be no better example than our next rhyme. Because this one transforms one of the world's most famous landmarks into the center of a centuries-old mystery. London Bridge is falling down. Most people know the opening line. Few know the legends attached to it. One of the most persistent claims involves something known as a foundation sacrifice. According to folklore found throughout Europe, important structures sometimes required a human sacrifice buried beneath them to ensure their stability. Some versions of the legend suggest children were entombed beneath London Bridge itself. It's a chilling idea. The problem, once again, is evidence. No archaeological discoveries have confirmed such claims beneath London Bridge. Still, the story refuses to die. And perhaps that's because it taps into a fear much older than the rhyme itself. The fear that great achievements sometimes come at terrible cost. Whether true or not, the legend transformed a simple song about a bridge into something far darker. And speaking of darkness attached to history, there is one figure who appears again and again whenever nursery rhymes are discussed. A queen remembered by a nickname, Bloody Mary. For many people, the rhyme Mary, Mary, quite contrary is inseparable from Queen Mary I of England. The theory claims the rhyme references her reign and her persecution of Protestants. Some interpretations suggest the silver bells and cockle shells represent instruments of torture. Others disagree completely. Many historians argue there is little evidence connecting the rhyme to Queen Mary at all. The gardening imagery may be simply exactly what it appears to be. A garden, some flowers, growth, nothing really sinister. Yet the darker interpretation continues to thrive. Because once a story enters popular imagination, it develops a life of its own. And Queen Mary doesn't disappear from nursery rhyme folklore just yet. She appears again in another famous song, one involving 3 unfortunate little mice. According to popular legend, the mice represent Protestant bishops who opposed Mary during her reign. Their blindness symbolizes religious persecution. The farmer's wife represents the queen herself, and the cutting of their tails reflects punishment and execution. It's a dramatic interpretation, a memorable one, but once again, historians remain skeptical. The timeline doesn't fit comfortably. The evidence remains quite thin. Still, the rhyme itself contains imagery that's surprisingly violent for something taught to children, which raises an interesting question. If many of these dark explanations aren't supported by history, are there any nursery rhymes that genuinely preserve echoes of real conflict? That brings us to Goosey Goosey Gander. Unlike some of the previous examples, this one may have stronger historical roots. The rhyme tells of an old man who refuses to say his prayers and is thrown down the stairs. That sounds oddly specific. Some researchers believe it may reference the period of religious turmoil in England when Catholic priests were forced into hiding. Special hiding places known as priest holes were built into homes to conceal them from authorities. According to the theory, the old man in the rhyme was discovered and punished for refusing to conform. While certainty remains elusive, this interpretation rests on a firmer historical ground than many of the others we have discussed. And that brings us to the heart of tonight's story. Not whether every nursery rhyme has a hidden meaning, not whether every legend is true or false, but why we're so eager to believe that they are. Why do these stories survive? Why do they spread? Why are we drawn to them? Part of the answer may be that nursery rhymes feel ancient. They connect us to childhood, to generations long gone, to voices we've never heard. When we learn that a rhyme might be linked to plague, persecution, or tragedy, it suddenly feels larger than itself. It becomes a doorway into the past, a secret hidden in plain sight. And even when historians challenge those interpretations, the stories remain, because people love mysteries. We love the possibility that ordinary things conceal extraordinary truths. Sometimes the legend becomes stronger than the evidence. Sometimes the myth becomes more memorable than history itself. And perhaps that's exactly what's happened here. The real story isn't that nursery rhymes contain hidden darkness. The real story is that we've spent centuries adding darkness to them, layer by layer, generation after generation, until it's almost impossible to separate the original song from the stories surrounding it. The next time you hear one of these nursery rhymes, listen carefully. Not because you're about to uncover a secret code or a forgotten conspiracy, but because you're hearing something much older than yourself. A piece of folklore that has survived countless generations. A song that has traveled throughout history, collecting stories along the way. Some true and some false. Some impossible to verify. Yet all of them revealing something about the people who passed them down. And maybe that's the most interesting part of all of this. Not strictly based in hidden meanings, but more so the realization that we are still creating folklore today, just as people did centuries ago. We're still telling stories, still embellishing them, still searching for darkness in familiar places. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Unsettling Stories. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into folklore, history, and the strange tales hiding behind childhood memories, be sure to subscribe and let me know what unsettling topic you would like to explore next. Until next time.